November 9th, and continuing for more than 24 hours, mobs rampaged through Germany and Austria, attacking and arresting Jews. On those two fateful nights, scores of Jews were murdered, hundreds were maimed, thousands of Jewish-owned businesses were vandalized, and approximately 30,000 Jewish men were sent to concentration camps. And during those 2 nights, more than 1,000 synagogues in Germany and Austria were dynamited and burned to the ground as police and firefighters simply looked on. Their job on those nights was only to ensure one thing, that the flames did not spread or destroy German property. Germanic property had to be protected. Those nights would be forever referred to infamously as the nights of broken glass, Kristallnacht, referring to the shattered window panes that littered the streets of Germany and Austria in the aftermath of the nightmare. But Kristallnacht shattered more than windows. The events of November 9th and 10th turned out to be the opening scene, just the opening scene, in a catastrophe, an unspeakable catastrophe that would soon shatter European Jewry, the very heart, the very cultural center of world Judaism. In the course of the next 7 years, 6 million innocent Jewish men and women and children, 1.5 million children and babies, including all of my aunts and uncles and all my cousins, would be slaughtered systematically by the Nazi regime. And thus in early November, synagogues and Jewish communities throughout the world gather, as we do this morning, to remember the first scene in that catastrophe, Kristallnacht. And at this time, I'll ask you to please rise as we light this candle, this yellow candle. Its yellow wax symbolizes the yellow Star of David the Nazi regime forced us to wear during the Holocaust years. And at this time, as I always do, I'll call upon Mitch Goldblatt, a member of our men's club who was just honored as a keeper of the flame. It was Mitch's dad, Mr. Barry Goldblatt, may he rest in peace, who was, ironically, the original designer of this yellow Holocaust memorial candle, which is now used around the world. I present Mitch.
Thank you, Rabbi. Each spring, coinciding with Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day, men's clubs throughout this nation and throughout the world distribute yellow candles such as the one that's in front of me to congregants and others who are interested in remembering the Holocaust by lighting such a candle. And just from voluntary donations, we are able to have programs that remember the Holocaust, programs and remembrances, scholarships that help us never forget what took place. And so in lighting this candle this morning, we remember those who have passed away, those who perished in Europe during the time of the Holocaust, the 6 million Jews, as well as the righteous among nations who also perished. At this time, I'll light the candle.
We pause for a moment of silence. Ose shalom bimromav, uyase shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Ya'ase shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, ya'ase shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. Oh Lord, let us see shalom. We still believe in the possibility of shalom, and let us say, Amen. Thanks so much. Thank you. Let's be seated. At this time, I'll remind you to please turn cell phones off. Please turn your cell phones off. We're trying to create a sacred space and a sacred hour this morning. As I said, we gather on this day every year to commemorate two histories, and I mentioned that they were diametrically opposite aspects of the Holocaust. The first is the moral darkness that descended on Europe during World War II, the total collapse of morality, and the unspeakable events that took place in that darkness. The second event we gather for is that in the midst of the darkness there were incredibly, almost miraculously, almost mysteriously, beacons that resisted the darkness, resisted the evil, points of light that pierced the darkness and refused, in the face of unspeakable danger, refused to be extinguished. You know, as we become mindful of the atrocities of the past, and for that matter, the atrocities which continue to make headlines in our own day, sadly, we may at times find it hard to feel hopeful about the human future, the future of our race, the future of humanity. But friends, that's exactly why we here at Congregation Or Shalom, remember, Or Shalom, the light of Shalom, believe it's so important, especially at this time of Kristallnacht commemoration, to point to people, ordinary individuals who found themselves suddenly, as I say, inexplicably, miraculously, almost mysteriously, doing extraordinary things. Sometimes they did not even recognize themselves and what they were doing. At these gatherings, we've been pointing to ordinary people who found within themselves, despite the enormity of the danger they faced, the conscience and the courage to stand up to evil rather than just watch it happen. We've come together at this time every year to celebrate their heroic deeds and to declare that their life-saving deeds will never, never be forgotten. True, they were precious few, comparatively precious few in number, compared to the overwhelming evil that was being perpetrated around them. Nevertheless, we gathered to proclaim that despite the inhumanity that they witnessed, the human heart is not entirely dark. In the face of inconceivable inhumanity, there is inconceivable goodness within the heart as well, and I would not be standing here if it were not for that inconceivable goodness that rescued my father out of the darkness. A man and a woman, Shiyune and Yokiko Sugihara, who risked their lives to save strangers of another race. Now, this morning, we've gathered to celebrate the conscience and the courage of one Marion Pritchard. We've come together to acknowledge publicly that Marion, in the midst of the Holocaust, turned herself into a beacon that defied the darkness. Indeed, Marion, as an acknowledgement of her heroism, received Israel's highest award, the Yad Vashem Award for the Righteous Among the Nations in 1981. Chasidei Umot Ha'olam Medal, and was named an honorary citizen of the Jewish state for her selflessness and selfless devotion. The image on the screen behind me is that of Marion in her mid-20s, wearing her UNRWA uniform, the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, which administered the DP camps, the displaced persons camps throughout Europe and Germany after the war. Marion learned Yiddish in order to tend better. This Dutch girl learned Yiddish so that she could tend to the victims, the survivors, the traumatized and bewildered survivors of the Holocaust in the DP camps. And this is the way she looked when she met one Lieutenant Tony Pritchard, who ran the camp, the director of the camp. And I hear Brian correcting me. Did I get it right? Tony? Anton, yes. And look at that face. It was, okay. Yes. Well, you remember, keep it in your mind, keep it in your mind's eye as our technician works to restore her face. Saving face is an important attribute. There's Alvin. Oh. So this is what she looked like when she met that dashing young American lieutenant. But let's learn more about this extraordinary human being who exemplifies truly the legacy of the hidden children of the Holocaust. And that's our overarching theme this morning, the hidden children of the Holocaust. The very few, very fortunate children who were taken in at great peril by inconceivably kind-hearted and courageous human beings. This morning we've assembled a series of presenters to accomplish this, and they're very powerful presenters. Just two quick notes about the program. First of all, we love it when questions are asked from the audience, but because we have such a powerful series of presenters, we will do our best to honor that tradition. And it's for that reason that you have found index cards with pencils. If you have questions in the course of the morning, write them down, and then they will be collected, and hopefully they will be read. Secondly, Senator Blumenthal's office called last night and said he's going to be running a little late this morning, so when he comes, we'll let him settle down, and then we may have to interrupt the proceedings, interrupt the program, to bring him in because he's got miles to go and many places to visit on this Sunday before Election Day. Our first speaker this morning is Professor Deborah Dwork, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome her to the congregation and to introduce her. Deborah Dwork is the founding director of the Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University. In that capacity, she developed the nation's first doctoral degree program in Holocaust history and genocide studies. The author of numerous award-winning books and translated into many languages, and with many documentary film credits to her name, including Ken Burns' Defying the Nazis, Deborah now serves as the Shapiro Senior Scholar in Residence at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. It's with great pleasure that we welcome Professor Dwork. Let me shake your hand.
Is this on? Yes, it's on. Yeah. Great. I just have to say, and I know I shouldn't, but I do have to say that it was Alvin's children who painted a pair of underpants for my oldest daughter when she was 2 years old, and with that, diapers were no more. So we thank Maya and Rafi to this day. It was my great privilege to sit at the head of the seminar table with Marion Pritchard once a week for one seminar, one semester every year for a number of years. We started together with a course on Jewish children during the Holocaust, went on to a course on rescue and resistance, to a number of other courses. It became a whole cycle of courses. Marion was what the students called the participant historian, and I was what they called the analyst historian. They read a text a week, and Marion spoke with them about issues that came up in the text that related to her own experience. The students were in awe of her. As the Polish saying goes, you could hear a fly fly when she spoke. And now I'm going to go behind the lectern to speak for 15 minutes, plus minus 10%, depending upon how often I breathe. But what I would like very much is for you to hear the words of Marion and of the students as they said it, and not my paraphrase, and that's why I go behind the lectern. Professor Pritchard was an exceptional joy, Dottie, a PhD student, recalled. She was frank and honest about her experiences in rescue and resistance, sharing events of a personal nature that were painful for her, but ones that she saw as important for our understanding of the situation in which she found herself. Her unselfishness helped save lives during the Holocaust, and her unselfishness helped broaden the knowledge and understanding of young scholars decades later. The students understood, too, that although she would have shrunk from the mere idea, she taught them to be better human beings. To be in the presence of a person of such boundless courageousness and heroism is an honor, an undergraduate observed. I am drawn to the study of the Holocaust because of the mind-boggling and utter disregard of human life. And I am drawn to Professor Pritchard and her teachings because of her overwhelming compassion and respect for human life. So who was this person? This Marion Pritchard, born Marion von Binsbergen. Marion von Binsbergen was a social work student in the University of Amsterdam when the Germans invaded the Netherlands. What prompted her to undertake illegal, clandestine, dangerous activities? As she told it, every day on her way to the university, she passed a small children's home. One day in 1942, she was frozen by the sight of Germans taking the children out to a truck. The children didn't move very fast. They were crying and they were upset. The Germans just picked them up by an arm or a leg or by their hair and threw them into the truck. I was sitting on my bike watching this. I knew this street as long as I'd been around. It was like a murder enacted in the room next to us right now. It's so shocking, you're immobilized. Two women came down that street from the other end and tried to stop them. And the Germans took those women and threw them on the truck too. And I sat on my bike watching and doing nothing. Total, overwhelming rage. I don't think I was ever so enraged in my life before. That was the last time Marion did nothing. She did not belong to a network Like nearly everyone involved in rescue, she worked on her own, helped by many others and aiding others in turn. Marion responded to the problems that arose day by day. As she said, there was always work to be done. The people I knew called on me to do things, but it wasn't organized. As Marion pointed out to our students, she, like all rescuers at that time, were untrained in clandestine work. Given her character, of course she was a passionately committed rescuer, but she was also lucky. She brought food, clothes, and papers to people in need. She sought out hiding places and escorted people to safe havens, and she took on special missions. Relaying one such incident to the class, Marion focused on the role of social assumptions and prejudices as she elaborated on the daily life in occupied Netherlands. An old friend of mine, a friend since we were born, called on me and said she was supposed to deliver a package to the north of Holland next day, and she's running a fever and she can't do it. Will I do it? I said yes. She told me where to pick up the package, behind the creche, a daycare center. A creche is a daycare center. I knew what the creche was. I knew what the function of the Hollandse Schouwburg, that's the central deportation point in Amsterdam, I knew what the function of the Hollandse Schouwburg was. But I didn't know that this rescue operation was going on there. Now, this rescue operation involved spiriting Jewish children out of the creche, the daycare center, that had been taken over by the Germans as an annex to a theater, the Hollandse Schouwburg, which served as the central deportation depot. Marion went to the creche, not quite sure what this package might be. I figured it was something illegal or something secret, and I thought it might be a child, but I didn't think about it. It could have been a number of other things too. So she was not taken aback when somebody came out and gave me a practically newborn baby girl. I was standing on the sidewalk and somebody gave me the baby. Marion took the first tram to the central station. The train journey north, and again Marion, took all day because the Germans took all our equipment. In German-occupied Holland, there were no new tires, no new bicycles, no new baby carriages. It took a long time to get anywhere, which made every move arduous and frustrating. And being constantly cold and hungry was debilitating. So in this case, the trip took hours and hours and hours, she remembered. I had been told that I would be met at the station by a man. There was indeed a man, and he told me I was expected. But the people I was supposed to go to weren't around anymore. They had been arrested. He clearly felt that he had done his duty by telling me that I had just better get back on another train and go back to Amsterdam. I was tired and cold and hungry and sick and tired of that poor baby. I had been given a bottle for it, but that was long gone by then. The baby was fussy, and I just wanted to drop it and leave. The man said I could come to his house with him and rest for a while. Maybe his wife could find some milk for the baby before we went on our way. We went to a modest house at the end of the street that ran through the village. We went inside, and it was warm. I sat down on a chair and fell asleep. When I woke up, the woman was changing and feeding the baby and telling her own children that I was a sinner. I had this baby out of wedlock, and my punishment would be that I could never see the child again. As he walked me back to the station, the husband apologized for saying these terrible things about me. In those days, a girl didn't do such things. But I understood that when the people in the village would ask the children, "Where did that baby come from?" the youngsters would give a perfectly acceptable explanation in the context of those times. Marion responded to many calls for immediate assistance, and at the same time, she hid 3 children, one of whom is right here, and their father. From Marion, the students learned how those 8 words, "I hid 3 Jewish children and their father," translated into daily life. How did this come about? How did they manage? What were the consequences? I leave these questions dangling for Bonnie to answer. By the end of the war, Marion noted, she had killed, stolen, lied, everything. I had broken every one of the 10 commandments, except maybe the first. Still, she did not see her work as part of the, as she called it, real resistance. Like most rescuers, she said she did what had to be done. I didn't think about it. I just did it. The students thought differently. I was struck hard by her modesty, telling the class about her truly heroic acts, and all the while insisting that she did nothing extraordinary, Beth observed. She is a true Eshet Chayil, woman of valor. Marion and I sat together for hours on end in Vershire, New Haven, Wellfleet, and Worcester, recording her oral history. Her experience as participant historian shaped mine as analytic historian. Jews were at least as active in rescue operations as Gentiles, Marion asserted on several occasions, not solely to save themselves, but also to save others. Some were as vulnerable as the people they sought to save, she insisted. The students in our classes wrestled with the meaning and the significance of rescue as a form of resistance. Marion's actions illuminated how some people, Gentiles and Jews, transcended the hardships they endured each day. Despite the terror of German rule, it was possible to circumvent difficulties and negotiate obstacles. Not everyone stood by silently. Not everyone participated in genocide. Other forms of behavior were practicable and feasible. At the same time, the history of the Holocaust is a story of utter perdition and ruin. So why are the rescuers significant? Let us think again about the devastation of Sodom. When God decided to destroy the city of Sodom because sin and injustice ruled, Abraham reminded God that the righteous would fall with the wicked. Perhaps, Abraham suggested, there were as many as 50 righteous people in Sodom. God agreed with Abraham. The city would be saved if he found 50 such souls. Abraham had won the point, and so he haggled. If God would spare the city for the sake of 50, why not 40 or 30 or 20 or 10? And there the bargain was struck. 10 righteous people were not to be found. Sodom was destroyed, unlamented to this day. During the Holocaust, by contrast, hundreds of thousands of righteous Jews and Gentiles emerged throughout Nazi Europe. Still, there is no silver lining to the Holocaust. One cannot say it was the most lethal, most geographically comprehensive genocide in the history of Western civilization, but the rescuers were heroes. No. What we can say, however, is the Holocaust was the most lethal, most geographically comprehensive genocide in the history of Western civilization, and the rescuers were heroes at the same time, and at the same time. And thus, Marion's legacy to all of us is hope.
Thanks. Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. BonnieGreenberg is our storyteller today. Bonnie is singing Kaddish for Marion. Marion passed away on December 11th, almost a year ago, and Bonnie is still saying Kaddish for her. Bonnie's stories are rooted in her love of people, her Appalachian childhood, and her years of living in Israel. We actually spoke a little Hebrew last night. Bonnie has a special interest in stories of Jewish and Gentile resistance during the Holocaust. This story is about her dear friend, Dr. Marion Pritchard, whose courage we honor this day, and we welcome Bonnie and Larry from the great town of Newton, Massachusetts.
Okay, that's just about the right size for me. Thanks. I'm just going to move out of the light there. Hamatzil nefesh echad keilu itzil olam umolo. He who saves one life is as if he saved a whole world. She who saves one soul is as if she saved a whole world. Recently, I visited Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. Some of you have probably been there. It's Israel's Holocaust Museum, and it sits atop Har HaZikaron, the Hill of Remembrance, and it's in honor of the 6 million Jews who were murdered by the Nazis in World War II. It is a nation's monument to grief. The first hall I entered was the Children's Hall for the 1.5 million children that were slain. And there were darkness all around me except for some few Yortzeit candles. And the flames from those candles were reflected and re-reflected from hundreds of mirrors until I was completely surrounded by the flickering flames. But they shed no warmth. nor did they shed any light on what was such a dismal time in Jewish history. The opposite. I stood there chilled to the bone, my soul hurt, as I heard the name of each child being read aloud. They say that it takes 6 months to completely read through that list. When the Nazis invaded a country in Europe during World War II, the annihilation of the Jews was nearly complete. But here and there, as we've heard, there were rescuers. Many were non-Jews. What was it that gave these Gentiles the courage to care? And today we're talking about my friend Dr. Marion Pritchard, who had that courage. I believe it was in 1983 that Yad Vashem honored her with a medal and a tree that was planted on the Avenue of the Righteous Gentile. And while I was there, I went and got the map and set out to find that tree. I was successful. I found the tree and I was standing, and later, if you like, I'll show you the picture. I was standing by that tree and looking over the view of Jerusalem when my meditation was suddenly interrupted by a school bus that drove up beside me. And Israeli children were there for a field trip to Yad Vashem. The doors of the bus opened, and the children came spilling out noisily. Oh my, there were blondes with blue eyes. There were curly-haired brunettes. There were redheads with freckles. There was dark skin, light skin. What is a Jewish look anyway? Oh, if Hitler could see this. I was reminded of a conversation that I'd had with Marion not that long ago, and I want to tell you a little about that, and I'd like to use her words. So, Bonnie, I was at Shabbos services not long ago. You know how all the children run up to the bima and help lead the kiddush at the end of the service? Well, there were blondes with blue eyes, and there were curly-haired brunettes, and there was a little rambunctious redhead with a kippah on his head, of course. And you know, after all these years, more than a half a century, I still could only think, those quiet blondes, they would be easier to hide. That rambunctious redhead would be too easily identified as a Jew. You see, in Amsterdam, where I grew up, and where the war was raging heavily, there was hardly a Jew to be found on the streets. At that time, the Jews had either been deported, or they were in hiding, or they were passing themselves as non-Jews. Well, let me tell you the story about Esther. Esther was a 16-year-old Orthodox girl. Oh, she was beautiful with her whole life ahead of her. And I had to find a hiding place for her. You know, it was difficult to get people to hide and harbor a Jew. It was so dangerous to them. And I finally found an elderly Dutch couple. You know those houses along the canal in Amsterdam? They're usually, 3-4 stories tall. And that's the kind of house these people had. They had their own business in the first floor. And it was a clock and watch repair shop. And then they lived on the second and third floor. And they placed Esther in a windowless room. There wasn't a thing in that house that bespoke a teenager living there. There wasn't even a magazine for teenagers. So I would come frequently and talk to Esther, and she was so worried about her family and had no knowledge of what was going on outside that room. But one day, she really surprised me. I came to see her, and she said, "Marion, I have an idea. It's an idea to spoil Hitler's plan." Yeah? Yes. I'm going to have a baby, and I want you to take my baby to my parents' friend's house. They're Christians, and they'll take care of my baby till the war is over. And then wherever there's a Jewish congregation left, take my baby to be raised as a Jew. I was stunned to hear such a plan from an Orthodox Jewish girl. I said, oh, Esther, I mean, it's not a great idea. You would have to have prenatal care, and you would have to have certain kinds of medications, perhaps. And, well, she had an answer for everything that I said. So finally, I just looked at her and I said, Esther, how are you going to get pregnant? Well, she had an answer for that, too. Her boyfriend was a nice young Orthodox young man, and he was passing as a Gentile, hiding as many children as he could. And she said, bring him to me. And I did. One late afternoon, we came to the watch repair shop, and I asked the owner to go in the back and get my watch that was being repaired. And while he did, Esther's boyfriend slipped up the stairs, and he stayed with her for 2 days. Oh, the family was furious when they found out that Esther was pregnant. Why, the cry of a baby could be heard through the walls. Well, fortunately, 9 months later, I came to visit Esther often, and I was there that day that she delivered. And I don't know how we did it, because neither of us had had any experience at all with this, but we brought that baby into this world. And I wrapped the child in a warm blanket, and I took that baby to her parents' friends. Later that year, Esther was found out, and she was deported. And her boyfriend also died in a concentration camp. But the child, their child, survived the war. I'm telling you, so I'm getting something on a tree on the avenue of the righteous Gentile. But where is that avenue for the righteous Jew? We work together. There were so many Jews who risked their own life to save other Jews. Well, at just about that same time, I was asked to take care of a young family. Freddie Pollock and his 3 children. He had 2 sons, 3 years old, 6 years old, and baby Erica, 2.5 months old. At first, I just went on weekends. They were in this lovely house called Pax, about a half hour out of Amsterdam. And there we had built a hiding place for them. In fact, Freddie had helped. We had dug up the floorboards of the living room in the room that we were given. And he had dug out like a small basement, room for a chair and a table, some toys. We would give baby Erica some sleeping powder so she wouldn't cry. And sometimes they would be down there for a long time. And then I had a pistol that he'd given me as well. And it was on the shelf over the couch, though I was assured I would never really have to think about using that. But often we would leave that hiding place open so that they could jump into it quickly if necessary. And once they were down there, I would just put the floorboards back and the linoleum over that, and then a rug, and then a table and a bench. And you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell anything. Now, the Nazis used to have something at night that they called actions or razzias. There was a roundup. And they would come after curfew from house to house, searching for Jews, hoping to capture a few. And one night, I heard the motorized vehicle. After curfew, well, we knew it was the Nazis because none of us had cars. And so the family went down into the hiding place. Everything was covered over. And the knock at the door was 3 German soldiers and a Dutch Nazi collaborator, a policeman, collaborating with them, going door to door. And they searched. They searched carefully. And I trembled inside, I must say. But they found nothing, and they found no one, and they left. And soon thereafter, baby Erica began to cry, and so I let the children come up and go back into the bedroom, but Freddie stayed down, and we kept the whole thing covered over. Well, that Dutch policeman knew that sometimes after a raid, wherever the Jews were hiding, they would come back. And so if you came back an hour later, you might find some. And that's exactly what happened. He came back. I had left the door ajar in my haste, and he pushed the door open, and he started pushing me to the back of the room, screaming at me, "Where are those Jews? Where do you hide the Jewish swine?" and I was being pushed toward the back of the room near the couch, I remembered about the pistol, and I reached up, and I brought the pistol down and shot him. And I could tell from the look on his face as he slumped to the floor that he hadn't expected that. I was exhilarated. I'd shot the son of a bitch. But then I panicked. What was I going to do with this body? What could I do with this body? Well, before I knew it, Karl Puntz was right beside me. He was a Jewish ballet dancer hiding in the house next door. He must have heard the shot, and he was right there. And he devised a very clever plan. The baker who comes with the wooden wagon and the horse every day delivering the baked goods. Yes, we'll get him. He knows the mortician. And the mortician hates the Germans. And that's what happened. They came with the wooden wagon. They piled that body into a coffin of a man who was to be buried the next day. And I hope his family would have approved. There are things that I regret. I wish I could have saved more Jews. There must have been many opportunities that I missed. And I wish that there was an avenue for the righteous Jew. So many worked with us. So many lost their lives rescuing other Jews. I've come to agree with Elie Wiesel. Though this story makes me weepy and it's hard to tell, it must be told. And so I go around the country telling this story. And I was in Atlanta recently when a little boy about 8 years old came up to me after I talked. And he said, Dr. Pritchard, I wonder if I could have your phone number. Oh, you want to call me? No, ma'am. I want to give the number to my parents in case the Holocaust comes to America. And so recently I spoke with an Israeli woman at a gathering, and I said, why isn't there an avenue for the righteous Jew? And she said, because we're family. We have to do that for each other. I said, no. If things are ever to change, we must realize we are all of one family. We are all of one family. Hamatzil nefesh echad kilu itzil olam ulo. He who saves one life is as if he saved a whole world. She who saves one soul is as if she saved a whole world.
Unbelievable. Thank you. Transcendent. Transcendent. Thank you. I found a 5-minute clip, 5 minutes and 24 seconds of Marion online. And by the way, Marion is online. She's everywhere on the internet. Kids, you can find Marion Pritchard just by Googling Marion Pritchard. You will see, especially if you hit Google videos, you will see many, many videos of this remarkable woman, especially this one really caught my attention. Here is Marion in these 5 minutes explaining how it came to be that she actually killed a human being.
So my parents' friends' children tended to be 10 to 15 years older than I. But I knew brother built a hiding place underneath the living room floor, and at night I'd open it up, because when you heard a motor vehicle come, you knew, or a truck or whatever, you knew that it wasn't somebody Dutch. You knew it was most likely the Nazis looking for Jews. So we practiced, and I could get him and the kids in there and cover it all up in about 30 seconds. And this one particular night, a Dutch Nazi policeman brought 3 German Nazi officers to the house, and I thought they were in the hiding place, but I let them out. I let the kids out after half an hour because I hadn't had time to give the baby a sleeping diaper, and she began to cry. And Freddie decided to stay in the hiding place because he was working on his PhD thesis, and he was in the middle of an important chapter. Some people don't know how to concentrate. So then the Dutch policeman came back because it was customary for the person in hiding to sleep in the same bed with a member of the host family, because if the Nazis came and they found, say, that there were 5 beds slept in, but only 4 people, they could guess that the 5th person had gone out the window or something like that. So this night, just the Dutch Nazi policeman came back, and I couldn't think of anything else to do except to shoot him. Nick, the Gentile who had asked me to find a place for them, had given it to me, and I put it behind the books on the shelf above the bed, never intending to use it. I'm against capital punishment, and I'm against abortion. I can make exceptions on abortion, of course, but I am basically opposed to capital punishment and killing in general. But your unconscious is quite powerful, and when it was a choice, most likely between the kids and him, I chose him. And I didn't wait to see what he was going to do or what he was going to say. By then, obviously, if he'd gone into the other room, he would have seen the kids. He might have known the kids were around anyway, but my instinct was that if I didn't get rid of him, those kids were doomed. So we talked briefly. We decided that Carol would go walk to the village, which of course was strictly against the rules. You're not supposed to be out during curfew, especially if you're a Jew, you're not supposed to be out during curfew. And I suggested that he stay with the kids and that I go to the village, but he wasn't having any of that. And he went to see the baker, and I have a picture of the baker somewhere, who in normal times brought his wares around in a wagon with a horse. And the baker agreed that as soon as curfew ended in the morning, he would come with his horse and wagon and get the body. And before Carol came back, together they went to see the local undertaker. And the local undertaker agreed to bury the body in a coffin with somebody who was having a funeral the next day.
That video was made in 2012. She was 92 years old. Was it? That can't be right. Can't be right? That's the information I received online.
The house she's in, she moved out of it.
How old was she here?
Yeah, the cat in the background.
The cat gives it away. So what is the correct information? How old is she here?
70s.
Really? 70s. Okay, sorry, wrong information. Sorry about that. Now at this time, and please feel free to correct as often as you like. Yes, yes. At this time, Senator Blumenthal was expected, and he will be coming, I have faith. In the meantime, however, so as I mentioned, when he comes, we'll let him settle in, and then we'll interrupt the program. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask 4 very special people who I met last night to please come forward. And you are Arnie Pritchard, please come forward, and Brian Pritchard from Los Angeles. Arnie lives here in the New Haven area, and Brian, brother Brian, lives in Los Angeles and flew in. We have something in common. Aside from Marion Pritchard, we love the folk music of Phil Oakes. We sang Up a Storm last night at the restaurant. We sang almost every Phil Oakes number. And maybe we'll do some more after the show. We're also going to call upon, amazingly, Erica. You see the picture? You see that picture? Do you see Erica on Marion's lap? No, I'm thinking the picture they're holding in their hands. The picture they're holding in their hands, yeah. You see that baby? She flew in from Holland several days ago. She's with us today. Her name is Erica Pollock. Baby Erica is with us, amazingly. So we'll call upon Erica. And then, hold on to your hats, hold on to your yarmulkes. Are you still sitting? Marion, would you please come forward, Marion Pritchard? Granddaughter. And Arnie and Brian and Erica, please come forward. Let's be seated. So I'm going to start with the lady on my right, and tears are welling up again, Erica, as they did last night. So I'm an emotional kind of guy. This is Erica. This is baby Erica. There's Erica. You're looking at Erica in that picture. As she was being raised and cared for by our heroine, Marion. Erica flew in from Holland several days ago, and she is with us today. Erica, when did you find out that there was one Marion van Binsbergen, later Marion Pritchard, who saved your life, who raised you, who cared for you clandestinely for 3 years? When did you find out?
Well, there was not much spoken about in my family, but there was a vague story that they lived in a tiny place, and there was Marion, Auntie Marion, she was called, but after the war she had gone to America, so nobody seemed to know her, of the kids, of my brothers and me. And I thought my parents hadn't any contact with her. So it was a story which didn't interest me very much until the moment I got my first child. I was not an early mother, I was 34. And having this baby, I realized what a work it was. I had a job as a psychologist. I had a partner. I was not prepared to do all the work. And then I suddenly got this urge to meet a woman who did take care of me as a baby in horrible circumstances. No Pampers, easy for me, but no Pampers then. Nothing, no soap, nothing. And I thought, wow, I have to meet her. I have to contact her. So there it began. After my 34th birthday, I think I was nearly 36 or so. She came to Amsterdam. I found out. I asked my father her address. I contacted her. And she told me next time I'll be in Amsterdam to visit my old ballet teacher and visit my brother. Then I'll meet you. So it happened. And that was an enormous happening, because, you see, you don't know a person, you meet her, and something happens. She had got a psychoanalyst, I got a psychologist, and bam, it went like that.
Thank you. Erica, who was the first to tell you that there was a Marion Pritchard?
Yes.
Who was the first to tell you this information?
Yes, it was not a secret. There's always been this name, but not what she really did for us. It was a name that passed in stories, but like many families in Western Europe, the war wasn't spoken over a lot. And we had always this feeling we had not been in concentration camps, so be silent, because there are persons who had much more difficult time than we had. So it was an unspoken thing. Only when I got in high school, I realized that I had contact with many Jewish or half-Jewish, or how could you say, persons. We had the same sort of laughing, same sort of jokes, same sort of stories. They all had the same, that about the war, nothing was spoken about in their families. The silence.
Thank you. Arnie and Brian, these are brothers. Arnie lives in the New Haven area, in the Westville section. Yes, shalom again. And Brian flew in from Los Angeles for this event. When did you first find out that your mother did these things? Last night, I felt like I was talking to the Smothers Brothers at the restaurant. Truly, I was channeling the Smothers Brothers. So who is it going to be?
I'll start, and then
We went through this last night.
yeah, we did.
He's my
Okay.
older brother.
Yeah.
Go first.
Okay. Well, my mother did occasionally say that we actually knew nothing about this until we were adults, and that is not really literally true. It has a core of truth to it, though. Ever since we were quite young, I couldn't put an exact number on it, but certainly early childhood, we knew in very general terms that my mother had helped Jews to hide during the during the war. But it was very rarely spoken of. And then she got this award in 1981, and that kind of opened the floodgates. And I would say almost all of the details about what happened, we have learned since, almost all the details that we ever learned, we have learned since she got the Righteous Gentile Award in 1981. And actually, I was so taken aback when I once heard my mother say that we literally knew nothing that I actually checked with Ivor and Brian. And they both basically confirmed my memory. So, anything.
She went to Israel for that award. She went to Israel for that award. Yeah.
Well, actually, she got the award at the Israeli consulate the Israeli consulate in Boston. And I tell a story. I actually remember that ceremony because it was, there were maybe 30 or 40 people present at the ceremony, and at the end of it, there was this reporter from a radio station she was going to do her job, and she was dodging through the crowd up to the front and held the mic in front of my mother and said, how did you feel when you were doing all these things? And she sort of looked at the reporter in that sort of calm, deliberate way that you saw in the video and said, most of the time, I was frightened out of my wits. Which I think kind of makes an important point because she was not someone who was naturally gifted by nature with iron nerves different from you and me. She was the same kind of being that you and I are and somehow found a way to overcome that fear. Anyway.
Senator Blumenthal, welcome. Have a seat, and we'll let you, we'll just continue a little bit longer, and then we'll call on you. Thank you so much. We know you have an incredibly busy schedule today. This is Brian, Arnie's brother. Arnie is someone who can vote for you and people you like. Right there. And so is Marion. Marion as well. This is Marion Pritchard, the granddaughter. Oh, you did vote for him?
My first ever vote.
What was that?
My first ever vote was
for the Senate?
Senator Blumenthal. Yeah.
Give her a hug. Give her a hug. But you see, Brian lives in Los Angeles and votes for another senator. And it was Brian's turn to say a few words. And we've already heard from Erica. This is baby Erica. You want Mitch, show the senator who she is. Yeah, that's Brian. Let's pick it up.
So the real Smothers Brothers act is with my twin brother, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. And I would echo what my older brother said. You also have to remember that for us, there's sort of a duplicity of this, of these events. There is the Dr. Pritchard that Bonnie and Deborah spoke of so eloquently, and I want to thank you for telling the stories and telling my mother's story. And then for us, there's Mom and Grammy. You know, to me, you know, this is the woman who taught me how to tie my shoes. And so there's a whole different side that we see. My mother had this very mysterious relationship with anything mechanical. A remote control was sort of beyond her. As a child, I remember, of course, we knew that she was Dutch and she'd been in the war. But upon reflecting on this question, we knew there were very little details, but we knew that she did good work. My father was in Patton's Army, and Bronze Star, Silver Star, Purple Heart, the whole 9 yards. But they didn't. We knew both of them were sort of heroic in some sense, but they took no pride in it. It wasn't something like, I fought for my country and all that. It was much more a sense of obligation as a human being to do the right thing. And they both didn't talk much about the detail because, as they said, most of it was really, really awful. Most of it was terrible, and they didn't want to go into that detail. They were there, they tried to do what they felt they must. Two people who killed, who totally opposed any kind of capital punishment. And so that detail was left out for us because they didn't think it was necessary. And it was only 20, 25 years later when the sort of revisionist stuff about the Holocaust came and my mother heard about that the switch just absolutely flipped for her. And she started talking about the detail as much as she could. After my father died, I did a lot of driving Miss Daisy to Clark University and back, and have heard much more of the details, some of which is public, some of which is not, that gets it more real. Amy my friend was another person who drove Miss Daisy a little bit, but there is the public and then the private perception.
Well, we're going to interrupt now, and I'll be calling on the senator, but I'm going to do that formally. So stay right there, and everybody stay right there. Stay put. Ready? Senator Richard Blumenthal. Is the United States Senator for the state of Connecticut. Mr. Blumenthal was re-elected last fall for his second term as United States Senator. Mazel tov once again, Senator. Prior to 2011, Senator Blumenthal served an unprecedented 5 terms as Connecticut's Attorney General. We remember you well. Again and again on Channel 8, arguing. fighting for all of us. We all remember how he advocated for us in that capacity. The senator happens to be connected to Kristallnacht on a personal level. Thank you, Senator, for taking time once again out of a busy pre-election day schedule to be here with us as we observe this important date in our history, Kristallnacht. This is your 11th consecutive year with us, and we are very mindful of that. Thank you so much. It gives me great pleasure to present Senator Richard Blumenthal. Stay right there. You're on.
Thank you.
You're on.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. It is my 11th consecutive year out of 11, and God willing, I will be with you again, because I know I will hear about it from the Rabbi if I am not. But I want to first thank him for his leadership and the congregation for your leadership. This occasion has such meaning for me. And I do have a personal connection to this occasion, Kristallnacht, because my dad came to this country in 1935. He was escaping what he saw coming in Germany. He was born in Frankfurt and grew up there and came to this country without his family, alone at age 17. Speaking no English, knowing virtually no one, having not much more than the shirt on his back, and this country, this great country, gave him a chance to succeed. I often think about what my father, who passed away about 10 years ago, would say today. And there are moments when I think he would be sad and even somewhat ashamed. No one loved this country more than my dad. And I am sure no one loved this country more than Marion Pritchard because of her experience during the Holocaust. And I've thought a lot about Marion Pritchard, Marion von Binsbergen, as she was known in 1940 when the Germans invaded Holland, and she had to make a choice. Her choice was extraordinary. And the reason I've been thinking about it so much, and I know that you're all familiar with this story, is that today I fear we may face similar choices, not putting ourselves in mortal danger as she did. She put herself at risk of death by sheltering the Pollock family. She was 21 years old. Think of it, a 21-year-old student. My 4 children are now older, and I remember when I was 21. I wonder whether I would have had the courage she did, the fortitude, to risk her life and her family's lives. And to then not only serve as she did during the war, but afterward in the displaced persons camp in Europe, and come back to study violence in this country and to speak about it and to keep alive the Holocaust, as we must do. That's the kind of courage and strength that we will need today. And I am certainly not here to talk about politics, but in my years, I have never seen so dangerously the threat to the rule of law and civil rights and civil liberties that we see today when people can march in a town in this country with torches and shouting epithets that we thought were behind us, with swastikas that we thought we would never see. And I told my father, while he was still alive, could never, ever happen here. So the memory of Marion Pritchard should be very much a part of who we are, very much alive with us today. And I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to show that we will keep alive that memory, that we will never forget the Holocaust, Kristallnacht, and the bravery and courage of people who stood up to it, who spoke up, who made acts of individual daring and bravery and giving and caring, keeping alive what we know is best in our tradition and humanity. So that is a long-winded way of saying what is said more concisely here.
And what is that?
I think on behalf of the family, it would be appropriate to hand it to Marion, the furthest person who can tell the story probably the longest. So if we can hand it to Marion Pritchard, granddaughter, that would be great.
Marion was named after Grandma. Grandma is her namesake. It's an amazing, amazing moment that we have, that we're sharing this morning, at any rate.
So I would like to take this great privilege, thank you to the rabbi for giving it to me, to present to Marion Pritchard's family and to her granddaughter, Marion now, but with thanks to Arnie and Brian and Erica for being here today and really gracing us with your presence and keeping alive your beautiful mother's story. Thank you, the rabbi. Thank you, the congregation. This is a certificate of special recognition, a commendation from the Senate of the United States, which I am very proud to present in honor of Marion Pritchard to Marion, her granddaughter. Thank you.
Pictures. Pictures. Who's getting a picture? I don't like it. Over there. I want to see you. I want to see you. This is important. Got it? Thank you so much, Senator. Marion, stay right there. Some people said to me there's a haunting resemblance between Grandma and, do you see it? I see the eyes, the eyes.
You should see my sister Grace.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Senator. We're going to carry on now. Erica, there was something you wanted to talk about concerning Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Memorial. Please.
Yes, you asked me when did I hear more about Marion's work and deeds in the war, and it was only till the Yad Vashem a medal, or how you say, the medal, that I asked why did she get it, and then the whole story came out in bits and bits. So that was the moment I realized really, but before there was this urge to contact to her from me when I got my first child. That was in 1978, and Yad Vashem was in 81, so that was near. Yeah, these came together. So I realized I give now an answer to your question.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Marion Pritchard. Whoops. Last night at dinner, you spoke of Grandma Marion's refrigerator. I don't mean the contents of the refrigerator, but the exterior of the refrigerator. I mean the magnets and the tchotchkes and the things that were hanging from the fridge, and lots and lots and lots of pictures. Would you please expand?
Well, Grandma's refrigerator was just covered in family pictures, top to bottom, the entire front and half of the side that wasn't up against a counter. And there were pictures of her grandchildren, me, my sisters, my cousins. There was one picture of Uncle Brian and Uncle Ivor on the back of a pony who was definitely not thrilled. There were pictures of Grandma's parents taken in the 19th century, and just lots and lots of family pictures, just this big mosaic. Yeah, should have been 20th century, sorry. And just sort of mixed in with all these family pictures as if they belonged there, because they did, were pictures of Erica and her brothers and their family. And it was just, people ask me when I found out, and I don't remember a time that I didn't know. It was just sort of always there. And I would look at all these pictures and ask who they were and hear these stories.
Erica, last night you mentioned something also that was very touching, just very, very poignant. You mentioned that Marion, if I remember correctly, said, well, I gave birth to 3 sons, Arnie and Brian and Ivor, but I had a daughter before them. Is that what you said?
Yeah. She said it to me, so it felt very, very touching for me, because my brothers, when it got a bit outspoken, had more difficulty because their own mother left for most part of the time. In came Marion. So for me as a baby it was not difficult. There was only Marion, so I got very much attached to her. So much that after the war we had been sent to Switzerland for half a year, my elder brothers and me, to get a bit more healthy. And when I came back and saw that's what came out of my psychoanalysis, I saw that no Marion there anymore. I didn't speak for a year. I was just a very angry toddler, and people thought I was getting mad or something. Only my father believed in my sanity, so I'm still here. But that was a sort of reaction of having to miss somebody where you have been connected to so much.
Yes. By the way, at this time, I'd like to acknowledge, and we're so honored, Aviva, we are so honored. I want to acknowledge the presence of an Academy Award-winning documentary filmmaker who is with us today. I'm so touched, Aviva. Her name is Professor Aviva Slessin, a professor at New York University. In filmmaking, I guess, is the name of the of your career. And she herself, Aviva herself, was a hidden child in Shavil, Lithuania. She's a Litvak like myself. And was macht Yid? Aviva was a hidden child, one of the lucky, very, very few, precious few. And she went on to achieve an Academy Award and also to create a film which you can see online. I urge you to see it, entitled Secret Lives, Hidden Children and Their Rescuers During World War II, which features, among others, an interview with baby Erica, with Erica. Do you want to add anything? Do you want to add anything to that? Or?
No. But it was a very great experience to take part in the movie, because Marion was in it, I was in it, and different other pairs of rescuers and hidden children. So for my children, it was like we didn't hear about anything before. So I had to open up a bit. So it was a very, very nice, good, and valuable experience, all in all. Yeah.
Are there questions that will be coming from the audience? Sorry? Okay, they have to pass the cars to the sides. All right, please pass the cars to the sides, and they'll be collected, and then we will ask questions. Please stay where you are, and as a matter of fact, these questions may be directed at any of the presenters. I'll do that. You come after that. Oh. It should.
You wanted to first.
Yeah, let me do that. That's the emotional. It's very emotional. Yeah. well. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Be well. Be well. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck. Character morality?
It's not my question. It was given to me. The card that you passed over.
What was it they think that created the care, the core? The core.
I want to know what was it in, what did the sons think that created the core of Marion's
Clarity.
no character,
Personality.
and
Okay,
morality.
got it.
Her morality.
Got it.
Was it
Got
family?
it.
Was it
Thank you. Thank you.
You'll need to tell them the program so that other people will leave.
The program will continue now with questions and then a very emotional Kaddish led by BonnieGreenberg, who has been saying Kaddish for Marion the entire year as we approach the first yard site, the first anniversary. So please hang in. The first question, addressed to Marion's sons. What was it, do you think, that created the core of Marion's character and morality? Was it something in her family's behavior or personality? Was it church teachings? What was it that prompted her to do this?
That one I think is pretty clear. There was some stuff about the church early on, but she turned on that one and related it mostly to the way she was brought up, which I actually believe that I got something from that too, because she and my father turned around and did that. We were taught, she was taught by her father, the judge, and her mother, a fairly uppity person, to not be obedient, to be respectful, but not to be obedient. Differences of opinions about anything from sexuality to politics to whatever were welcome in our family all of the time. That was encouraged. And I remember in a sort of minorly little other related way, a story of when I was living in Vermont. Actually, I was helping my parents move to the house in Vermont in my 20s, and I encountered somebody who had laid some traps out of season for animals on our land, and I sprung them, and very soon that person who was a tracker figured out who I was and confronted me with a rifle in our front yard. And I told my mother this story, and he and I are friends now, by the way. And I told my mother this story, and she was a little horrified, like, what were you doing? You're protecting just a couple of beavers. What are you doing? And my response was, well, that's the way you brought me up. And I think that's how she was brought up. And that's where I think it came from.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks. You want to say something? Yeah, thank you. Here's another question. This might be addressed to Erica or maybe even Bonnie and Deborah. Think about it. What happened when the informant, the potential informant, was killed and did not return? Did authorities try to look for him? Was there any attempt to search for that person, perhaps members of his family? What was the aftermath? Yes, Deborah. This is Deborah.
So what Marion, that is a question that of course we asked Marion many times. And her answer was that number one, it was towards the end of the war. That was very important. So the Germans had other things to do. The second thing that was important is that it was a Dutch Nazi, an NS Bayer, whom she shot, not a German. And so the Germans had even less time and energy to worry about the Dutch NSB. And the third thing was that this was a rural community, and that particular person was loathed and despised widely. So the Dutch didn't care what happened to him, and the Germans didn't care what happened to him.
Yes. Arnie, you don't have are you going to disagree or what?
No, not at all. Yeah, one thing that I think has not come out during the discussion of that incident is that, granted, this guy might not have been the most admirable human being ever to walk the earth in some sense, but still, he was a human being, and my mother did express considerable regret about the terrible situation that led to the necessity of doing what she did. She still thinks that it was the better option of the ones she was facing, but she was not at all happy, except perhaps in that first rush afterwards. She was not at all happy about having been forced to take a human life as she saw it.
You mentioned that last night repeatedly, yeah. Here's a question, I think, for Erica. Erica, what became of your brothers and your father?
Well, they all came through the war. My grandparents have been in Theresienstadt, but they came through. They got the last train. They got the one train was an exchange with the Germans for money. They got people from Theresienstadt to Switzerland. So my grandparents were before the war. They were out of the camp. My father stayed in hiding just till the end of the war and came through. My brothers also. So my father lost his job after the war. He was one high in a magazine, in the, how do you call it? In a big magazine firm, a Jewish magazine firm, the Bijenkorf named. He had to take the upper leaders to a boat in a harbor in the beginning of the war. He should go with them, with my mother, but she was so pregnant of my elder brother, they weren't allowed to go on the boat. So the higher ranking persons of the firm were gone. After the war, my father knocked on the door and said, "Here I am, still alive, I want my job back." No way. So he had no job, very many debts, lost family. His sister was killed in Sobibor.
Sobibor was a death camp.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's so renowned in Holland. So, but he tried again. So my parents decided to go further together. I have two younger brothers, and the older ones, went to Switzerland. They rebuilt their lives in The Hague. That's where I grew up.
Here's a question. Did Marion's family know what she was doing, and what did they think? Bonnie? Yes? Arnie?
Okay. I'll try, and then anything Deborah can add. The family basically consisted of my mother, her brother, my Uncle Jan, who was 10 years younger than her, and her father and mother. That was the immediate family anyway. Her father actually died of cancer in the spring of 1942, which was just about the time that the hiding of Jews started to get really into full swing, so to speak. Her mother, who was English and very feisty, certainly knew, at least in very general terms, what she was doing. I don't know how much detail she knew. The general practice was not to tell anybody more detail than they needed to know in order to do their job, under the theory that anybody can be caught, anybody can be tortured, but what you don't know, you can't tell. So, and I believe our Uncle Jan must have been at least somewhat aware of it too, but probably not of too many details. Anything to add to that?
I just want to add a story about your grandmother, which I'm sure you know.
Flag story?
No, the milk story. So Marion always said about her mother that, as you heard, she was English, she was feisty, she was defiant, and she also thought she was English. That enough said. Rules did not apply to her. So this is very early on in the occupation period, and Marion had taken in, she was still at home, and she just for some days she had taken in a young boy. She had not, according to the story, the version I heard, she had not told your grandmother, but your grandmother knew. So the story that Marion told is that her mother asked the milkman for more milk, and Marion confronted her mother and said, "What are you doing? That could betray where he is." And her mother said, your grandmother said, "He's a young boy. He needs milk." So the boy got milk, and the milkman said nothing to anyone.
Thank you very much. Erica, here's a question. Can you explain why your mother was not with the family in hiding?
Okay, there's a fragile thing. In the beginning, it went slowly. It went slowly. In the beginning of the war, and the moment my father had to go into diving, my mother's non-Jewish, so they thought they would better separate. It would be healthier for the kids. So my mother went a bit her own way, doing work for the resistance, got the Yad Vashem also, because she did important things, but thinking it over, my conclusion is that she was better off with courageous things doing than doing 3 little children. My older brothers were brought to an orphanage in the beginning of the war because she couldn't handle it very much. So when I came as a baby, she couldn't handle it at all. So she vanished more and more. Marion came more and more to our house. That's the story.
Thank you. Here's a question. By what means did Marion get to the United States? Well, she fell in love with Lieutenant Tony Pritchard, but go ahead.
And sort of, it still speaks to the day.
Continues. How did she lose her Dutch accent?
She didn't. She didn't lose her Dutch accent, although I, as a child, since I was brought up with it, I couldn't really hear it. But all my friends were like, "She has such a Dutch accent." And I'm like, "Really?" But when she met my father, when they decided that they wanted to get married and come back to a country, both the Netherlands and the United States refused their entry as unmarried because that they wouldn't do it, and they couldn't go back to America or the Netherlands to get married. So the ironic thing is that they were married by a German Burgermeister in the place that their camp was, and once they were married by the Germans, then they could come back to America as a couple.
I heard the story that her bride dress was made by refugees, being refugees there, in the camp.
The gown was made by refugees.
Yeah, the gown.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. And here's a question for Bonnie. How did you come up with the idea to tell this story? Where does this come from? Yes, Bonnie is a renowned storyteller who has a great website. Just Google BonnieGreenberg. Yes.
Thank you. I was at a party one evening, and that Israeli woman that I talked about in the story, there was an Israeli woman there visiting her son. So she was a Hebrew-speaking person and really knew no English, but she knew a lot about the Holocaust. Marion was at the party also, and she was introduced to all of us, and it just turned out somehow I was in the middle of this person, the Israeli woman from just visiting, and Marion. And Marion and I had met maybe once before and clicked. You know how that happens. But that night, this woman really wanted to thank Marion for all she had done. And she had read the book, The Rescuers, and seen the picture that evening. And she said, she punched me. She said, "You have to tell her this." So I told Marion in English what the woman said in Hebrew. Then Marion said, you have to tell her this. So then I told her in Hebrew what Marion had said in English. And I was going back and forth like this. Larry can attest to this. My teeth hurt by the end of the evening. But I knew I wanted to know Marion more. And we, over the next few years, became very close.
Here's a question for you, a similar question. How did you get to meet Marion? That's the question. How did you meet Marion?
I met Marion the way Holocaust historians meet each other, just in the normal way. So what I can say is that I met her in the ordinary way, but it was an extraordinary relationship.
In the storytelling tradition as well, I just want to say, because he won't say it, the most profound impact of my mother's life that I experienced was the death of my father, the death of her husband. And she was never quite the same after that. Sometime after that, almost all of my father's letters back home during World War II were found in a footlocker. He's a historian with an idiotic memory, and for some things. And he has memorized a bunch of those letters and tells those stories. And so part of getting to know, if you want to know more about my mother and the lovely man that she married, you can find out more about him by going to his website and hearing some of those stories.
Want to say something? We're getting ready to say Kaddish, and BonnieGreenberg will lead us, but Marion wants to say a couple of words.
So going back a little bit to the, what about her, what made her who she was, one of the things that I remember most strongly about her is how much she believed in manners. She wrote thank you notes for thank you notes. I would send her a thank you note after Christmas, and a week later, I would get a thank you note in the mail thanking me for the thank you note. And I remember one year when I was a little teensy bit delayed with my thank you notes, the next year for Christmas, I got a book on manners. And I think that ties in very closely with her incredibly strong sense of justice, because she believed very strongly that every single human being, regardless of age, regardless of background, had inherent worth and dignity. And respecting people via manners was a very big part of that. And I remember another thing she believed was that nobody was too young for politics. And I remember I must have been about 8 years old, because I know when this took place. We were up in Vermont visiting her for the weekend, and we all went out to dinner. And for some reason, I don't remember why, it doesn't really matter, I went back to the house in a car with Grandma and Uncle Brian instead of with my parents. And so I was, sitting there in the back seat. We were driving through rural Vermont. They were asking me, like, what third grade was like. And just sort of out of nowhere, completely spontaneously, and with complete seriousness, no hint of any sort of mockery or condescension or anything, she asked me what I thought of the upcoming presidential election. And this was
How old were you again?
I was 8. And this must have been 2000. And that was just who she was. She genuinely wanted to know what her 8-year-old granddaughter thought of the upcoming presidential election. Because, if I had opinions about it, she wanted to know what they were. And that was who she was.
Marion, I can't help but think that you are approximately that age.
Older.
Are you a little older?
I'm now older than she was at the end of the war.
See.
Yeah.
I also couldn't help but notice this. So, do you mind if I read it?
Sure.
Okay, I'm not reading her palm. I'm not a palm reader. I'm reading a tattoo on her wrist. It says, "Courage, dear heart." That, I think, describes the entire morning. There it is, 3 words: courage, dear heart. Please rise for the Kaddish. Start again.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. Balma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'd'chayecho Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'vizman kari v'yimru. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Barach leolam u'lamei u'lamaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei d'kudusha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechamata da'miran b'yama v'yimru. Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen.
May precious memories bring solace, and may her life truly live on as an inspiration for all people. And let us say, Amen v'Amen. The Yortzeit will be observed on December 11th. December 11th. Let's be seated for a moment. Linda Swerdling, the chairperson of our education committee. Okay, very good. Informally. Very good. They will. They will say. Yes, they will say that.
I would first like to thank Erica's daughter for not having her baby, who was actually due, and we were kind of worried Erica wouldn't be here. So, yay. Your baby
Erica's about to become a grandmother.
Erica's daughter is due this coming Friday, so we're hoping that you'll send us an announcement so that we can, be there just like happy grandparents for you, because you are now part of our family here at Or Shalom. Again, a very successful adult education program, but no program runs smoothly without having many people who work endlessly and tirelessly to make it this way. This coming week, we'll be having an adult ed meeting and starting to think about next year's Kristallnacht program. That's how early it starts. So I really need to take a moment to introduce and personally thank all the members of my adult education committee who have worked tirelessly to bring each and every one of you these Kristallnacht programs for the past 11 years. We could never do this without the energy, knowledge, and file cabinet which Rabbi Wainhouse somehow has in his brain. So our real leader is not me, but Rabbi Wainhouse. You are... And then in no particular order, because each and every one of them are so important. Harvey Rems, Alan Cohen, Shirley Fiedler, Rhea Paul, Claire Newman, Paula Samuel, Fran Morrow, Barbara Bacall, Sue Gallant, my late husband Marty. I just want to thank each and every one of you. I know it was mentioned before that Men's Club was an important part of our program. They really do help to fund everything that we do today, because as you know, we don't charge for any adult ed program. So the yellow candle that Mitch lit, that's part of the reason why we can bring Erica here. That's part of the reason why we can provide transportation and to be able to do the things that we do. Please keep that in mind when we do our yellow candle. I'd also like to ask each of you to do another mitzvah today, another act of love and kindness, and donate to one of Marion Pritchard's favorite charities. Out in the lobby, you'll see 2 donation boxes. Please generously donate to either Save the Children Foundation or the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. All that money gets counted and checks get sent to the various committees for Marion Pritchard. And lastly, we have a teen cantor, Taylor Gordier. Is she here today? Taylor? It is, yes, Taylor's coming up. It is a tradition, and how lucky we are to have a beautiful young lady with the most angelic, beautiful voice. And I know she's going to be a senior next year. So maybe we could eke one more a year out of you. But I'd like to, as you stand, if you're near someone and you feel so inclined, because we feel so close to one another, if you'd like to hold a hand or just lock your arms as Taylor leads us in God Bless America, I'd appreciate it. Please rise.
Thank you. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Do it again. Do it again. Not now.